Hi everyone, Matthew DeSantis here with NYRA Bets, here with another Breeders' Cup Classic Contender Spotlight Series video, and this one is on the Big Gray, Arthur's Ride for trainer Bill Mott, who's going to try to take him gate to wire and win the Breeders' Cup Classic that way on Saturday. We'll see if he can do it. Before we get to that, make sure to press that like button and subscribe to the NYRA Bets YouTube channel. Subscribing is entirely free of cost, just notifies you when a new video drops on the channel. We have a lot of great stuff already up here in terms of trainer analysis with top contenders. We have some looks at the current post draw, as well as where to find value on the morning line. We have these Spotlight Series videos. Later in the week, we'll have a special long shot video, as well as a special cap in the card for Friday and a separate one for Saturday. So you definitely want to subscribe today. We got you covered moving forward after the Breeders' Cup as well. Also, the best way to play the Breeders' Cup is download the NYRA Bets app and play today. If you use the promo code CUP25, you get up to a $200 deposit match bonus and a $25 win bet. So definitely make sure to download the NYRA Bets app and play today. All right, listen, let's talk about Arthur's Ride. What a cool horse. He is a massive horse. And this is one of the things that I will say it's one of the benefits of working up here in New York and working over the summer up at Saratoga in particular is I've gotten to see a lot of these horses in person. I'm not sure, maybe outside of Sierra Leone, who is a specimen, I'm not sure there is a more physically impressive horse than Arthur's Ride. He is a massive animal. And one of the things, if you've ever been around horses, spent time around horses, thoroughbreds are not really that big in terms of being around other types of horses. I used to, associate with a lot of people in mounted fox hunting and things like that and hunts. And you see, drafts and draft crosses and Tennessee walkers and other types of horses. And a lot of times they're much bigger than thoroughbreds. Certainly taller. They're 16.3, 16.4 in terms of hands. I had one friend who always wanted to ride a horse that was 17 plus. God bless Abby. She would always do that. But anyway, point being, Arthur's Ride, I mean, he is a huge creature. And just when he comes in, he is a physically imposing presence in the paddock. And I think that is one of the reasons why so many people are drawn to him. He's obviously a beautiful gray horse as well. I think just casual fans are drawn to that. He has a lot of talent, but we know he's only got one way to win, which is go straight to the lead and see how far we can go. And he's an intriguing horse in this regard for Bill Mott. He's 15-1 on the morning line. He drew a little further outside, which I don't think is a problem because he's done that a couple of other times. But let's talk about Arthur's Ride in a little bit more detail. And first, we'll talk about trainer Bill Mott. Bill Mott, the last couple of years, has been very hot at the Breeders' Cup. He's won the last 2 years with Elite Power in the sprint, with Cody's Wish in the Dirt Mile. He also won with Just FYI last year. He has 5 Breeders' Cup wins in the last 2 years out of 14 starters. He's been on fire. The thing is, if you look beyond those last 2 years, Bill Mott is a rather low percentage trainer at the Breeders' Cup. He's a lower percentage trainer than virtually all of his colleagues in terms of other high-profile, high-entry barns. Todd Pletcher, Chad Brown, Steve Asmussen, Aiden O'Brien, all of these, Bob Baffert, all of these trainers are hitting between 11 and 13%. You really take the last 2 years out, and Mott is kind of down at 7%. And he's had these long stretches where he just went 0 for 29 at one point between 2000 and 2009. I mean, so he has these incredibly long stretches where he just has zero success. I bring this up because right now he is in the middle of a little bit of a cold streak. And I know there's people who disagree with me on this, but his horses are just not firing all the time. And, some of it is, I think maybe his best horses are not running right now. That certainly is an element of this. But I think over the last month in New York, he's winning at a 4% rate. He's really struggled in stakes races. Now, that said, he won a big stakes race at Churchill in the street sense in the Sovereignty. It was the horse Sovereignty on Saturday. So maybe he's breaking out of that, or on Sunday, I should say. Maybe he's breaking out of that funk a little bit with that win there. And he could be sitting on a big weekend at the Breeders' Cup. But he's, like I said, a little bit cold. Junior Alvarado, the jockey, I thought Junior's ridden this horse pretty well both the last couple of times out. And we'll take a closer look at those 2 races. Sired by Tappet. The horse is bred to run, has outstanding speed. Again, physical specimen, a big creature. The question is, how far can he go And this is a big class test. Now, his breakout victory was the Whitney, but as you can see, he doesn't really have any other standout efforts in graded stakes competition. He was a very lightly raced horse who took a long time to get ready, had some stops and starts in his career, and as a result was kind of facing optional claiming and allowance company and winning impressively in those efforts, but then stepping up and winning the Whitney in gate to wire fashion was really what punched his ticket here to the Breeders' Cup Classic, but also what put him on the national scene. That said, last time out in the Jockey Club Gold Cup, faded to fifth after being pressed by Highland Falls. And I think that's going to be a real key in this particular race. But listen, he can draw off, he can win impressively, but he needs to be gate to wire. And you see that when you look at the running lines. When he gets up front, that's when he's at his best. When he can get up front and he can get a comfortable lead, that's when he's going to draw off, and that's when he's going to win. He has some big speed figures here from a buyer standpoint. The 111 up at Saratoga during Belmont Racing Festival weekend. One thing I would caution, that was kind of an inflated buyer speed figure weekend, I would say. We saw a lot of horses run back slower. Well, here's the thing. Arthur's Ride backed that one up, actually. Ran a 110 then in the Whitney. But I would say that was a perfect setup for him on that day, carrying 118 pounds as well, carrying a little bit more the next time out, and then again on Saturday, 126. So, as I said, a horse that took a long time to get going, had some issues in terms of, had to take some time off, had a long layoff from February 2023 to March 2024, but seems to have finally gotten better and is kind of in his best, certainly stretch of health these last couple of races. But let's go and watch the Whitney. And I think there's a couple of things that are going to be key for Arthur's Ride's chances in the Breeders' Cup Classic. We're going to look at the start of the Whitney, and we're going to watch it for a while. And he's on the outside as well. He's on that number 11 post, actually. And you see Junior Alvarado very intentional about getting out up front. Skippy Longstocking is to his inside, the number 10. And Junior is very intentional. He knows he wants to get this horse over. It just rained right before the race or a little bit earlier that day, and so it was a muddy track. And Arthur's Ride had not run well over a wet track previously. But Arthur's Ride and Junior is able to start getting out up front. And this is where I want you to start paying attention as they turn into the back stretch. Notice now he's got the easy lead. He's up by over a length. We got to love the trees. But, he's up by over a length. Skippy's not really pressing him at this point. He's able to get comfortable. They're clicking off strong fractions, 23 and 1. I think they end up going 47 maybe and a little bit there, or 46 and 3, I should say, to the half. So they're going strong fractions, but notice he's not being pressed in any way. Now we're going to watch the finish here of the Whitney and turning for home again, no pressure on him, and he's able to spurt clear. And again, nobody's really, outside of Skippy, nobody was really even close to him here. He's been able to get into a comfortable stride the entire time, stay relaxed, and is able to now draw away from the field coming for home. You see a couple of horses like a Post Time, like a Crouppy, making up some ground. By the way, that's the same Crouppy that Next beat by, I think, 9.5 lengths in the Brooklyn. So, you saw some horses running up on him there, getting a little bit closer late. That was at 1 1/8 miles. Now, next time out was the Jockey Club Gold Cup, and it was a little bit of a different story because in the Jockey Club Gold Cup, the start was just entirely different because Flavien Prat on Highland Falls really took it to Arthur's Ride and pressed him the whole way. And so the start of that race is a little bit different. Arthur's Ride, again, on the outside, Highland Falls to his immediate inside. Very similar dynamics maybe to that Skippy race in the Whitney where Skippy was right to his inside as opposed to Arthur's Ride. But here, those two decide we're just going to go clear of everyone else. And Flavien eventually lets him get to the lead on the turn. But then Pratt does something that I think is so smart is he takes the horse back outside in terms of Highland Falls and he re-engages with Arthur's Ride. And he basically says, you're not going to get away from me. And if you look at the notes, he's kind of, he's kind of hounding him a lot of those on the back stretch. And he's kind of eyeball for eyeball with him and not letting him get comfortable. And you really see that here because now turning for home, he's right there with him. Unlike Skippy, who was a length or so back, he's right up there with him, pressing him the whole time. Highland Falls was never able to get as comfortable up on the lead, or I should say Arthur's Ride was never able to get as comfortable up on the lead As a result, we're now going a longer distance as well. And suddenly, once we get headed, Arthur's Ride kind of starts to turn it in. I think Junior realizes he's kind of out of horse too at this point. So I do think the 1.25 miles is a legitimate question as we see Highland Falls finish impressively, Arthur's Ride fade back to fifth. The 1.25 miles is a question. And I think it's a legitimate question to ask. Granted, Tappett's notoriously great at running distance, but it is still a question that he has yet to answer. Even though he did win at 1.25 miles going 3 back, that was a very easy lead against much lesser competition with Lasix. So there were a lot of things that were different about that race on a very speed favoring track that weekend up at Saratoga. So it's hard for me to kind of say, well, he can get the 1.25 miles because he did it once at Saratoga while he was open, 2 to 3 lengths the entire backstretch while running on Lasix and against optional claiming 62 company. This is a grade one, the biggest race of the year. Now, that said, if there is a way he can pull this off, it is that he's the only horse that needs the lead in this race. And there is a better chance that he gets the trip he got in the Whitney than the trip he gets in the Jockey Club Gold Cup. Now, if you think the difference between those races was simply the distance and not so much the ride and the experience that Arthur's Ride had, then you're going to be against him because you're going to go, listen, he just doesn't like 1.25 miles. But if you think that the ride and being pressed the entire way made the difference in that race and that he can get 1.25 miles under the right circumstances, he might get those circumstances on Saturday in the Breeders' Cup because Fierceness is going to be content to track. He drew inside of Arthur's Ride, but he knows that Arthur's Ride's going to cross and clear. Junior's going to be aggressive. He's got the whole front stretch to do it. He's going to be aggressive, get over and be on the lead. Fierceness is going to sit second and is going to stalk the pace, but maybe not in the same way that Highland Falls did. We'll see. I think more along the lines of Skippy Longstocking. And then you have a lot of horses that like to track the pace. You have a horse like City of Troy, Forever Young. If he breaks well, Highland Falls on the inside, Mixto. Some of these horses might try to be forward, but they don't necessarily not always need the lead horses. So unless somebody really tries to take it to Arthur's Ride, maybe a horse like Mixto does, maybe a horse, if he breaks really, really well, maybe a horse like Forever Young or City of Troy decide to try to go straight to the front and challenge Arthur's Ride early. But if Arthur's Ride's able to carve out a trip similar to the Whitney, where he's able to get a length and a half clear, and just Junior's able to get that horse to relax, conserve some energy, not feel so pressed, not feel so anxious by the presence of another horse right next to him, I think it's a winning recipe potentially. Again, he's going to need the right conditions. It was a speed favoring track when he got the 1.25 miles, but guess what? Del Mar's a speed favoring track too. If they're able to carve out honest but reasonable fractions, if they're able to go 112 and change, as he did up at Saratoga, going 1.25 miles in that optional claimer, if they're able to go 112 and change rather than 111 and change, and I think he's got a little bit of a chance to, in other words, give him that breather in the middle a little bit, maybe he can hold on. At 15 to 1, he's a big price. I think that it's just, he's a horse that I think is going to be hard to use from a wagering standpoint. And I bring that up because I think it is so dependent on how you see the race playing out from a pace standpoint. If you think there's a hot pace, he's an automatic toss, in my opinion, because he's not going to sustain a hot pace up front at 1.25 miles. He just isn't. If you think there's a modest pace, then maybe he's a horse you think maybe, hey, he can hold on and go all the way around. And if nobody's pressing him, why not? And you're getting a big price on him now, coming off that disappointing effort in the Jockey Club Gold Cup. So again, he just is a horse that's so pace dependent. I wish I could live bet him going into the first turn, if you know what I mean, because I think that'll tell you the whole outcome of the race. If he's up by 2 or a length and a half going into that first turn, man, I like his chances a lot, especially at 15 to 1. If he's being hounded going into the first turn, I don't care what odds you give me, I'm not using him. He's going to be a hard horse to use, I think, especially vertically or horizontally, I should say. If you want to use a random $10 win bet on him, I get it. If you really like the horse, I certainly understand that. But I think from a horizontal standpoint, including him in your pick sequences, gets a little bit tricky because if you're including him, then you probably have to include the other front end horses, and that would include City of Troy, that would include Fierceness, and so you're including now a lot of short prices along with a horse like Arthur's Ride. So you're really increasing the cost of your ticket quite considerably while including a lot of horses that are going to be a little bit more chalky. So just something to consider when you're thinking about ticket construction with a horse like Arthur's Ride. But listen, if you're out there at Del Mar, soak it up because he is a beautiful horse. And, he's one you find yourself rooting for just because of the connections and Bill Mott and Junior Alvarado. But, like I said, I think he's maybe a little against it in terms of getting that 1.25 miles under fair conditions. I think he's a little up against it in case anybody presses him at all. He's probably going to be a toss for me. I think best case scenario for him is he doesn't get pressed too much. He's able to carve out the fractions. And even then, I think he probably fades to third or fourth. Maybe you use him a little bit deeper underneath if you think those deep closers aren't really going to make a move. And it's really all going to be those horses kind of leading and tracking and stalking that are going to win. So at 15-1, you're at least getting a little bit of a price on that. All right. Well, that's going to do it for our Spotlight series on Arthur's Ride. Make sure to press that like and subscribe button today here on NYRA Bets. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Just to let you know, I'll be out at Del Mar for the Breeders' Cup. So if you're out there, come say hi. I'd love to see you and chat some ponies with you and just chat about life and see how you're doing. Appreciate everybody's support and kind words here on the channel. My name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and prosperous day at the races and reminding you, friends, it's now post time.